Welcome in. It is Big Ten Today. I'm Dave Revson. Lots of hoops talk to get to today. We will have Trey Demps on the show. Chris Collins of Northwestern joining us. National Signing Day as well. We will talk about all of that. But there is some sad news to report today as Penn State lost an all-time football legend overnight. Franco Harris passing away at the age of 72. Former Nittany Lion running back, also a legendary member of the great Pittsburgh Steelers teams of the 1970s. Played 3 years at Penn State alongside All-American Lydell Mitchell. Rushed for just over 2,000 yards, scored 24 touchdowns, was both an Orange Bowl and a Cotton Bowl champ. Harris went on to incredible fame in the NFL. He was a first-round pick, was the NFL Rookie of the Year, a four-time Super Bowl champ, a Hall of Famer. Harris perhaps best known as the recipient of the Immaculate Reception, maybe the most famous play in NFL history, as he snagged a deflected pass out of midair in a playoff game in 1972, ran it into the end zone for the winning touchdown against the Raiders. The 50th anniversary of that famed play is just 2 days from now, and very sadly, Franco Harris's number 32 was set to be retired by the Steelers over the weekend. In addition to being a great player, Harris also an incredibly enthusiastic supporter of the Penn State football program. He was a constant presence on campus in State College and was a great friend of the Big Ten Network as well, always willing to be a part of our programming. Most recently, this fall, Big Ten tailgate on campus, Franco Harris, one of the guests.
A Big Ten legend, an American football legend. Franco, thank you so much
see you guys.
for being here. It is a real treat.
Boy, having too much fun. I love this.
This is really cool to have you here for thousands of reasons. But one of them is, this is the 50th anniversary of the Immaculate Reception.
Wow.
Back when that happened, how long after that play ended did it dawn on you that this play will live on the rest of your life?
You know what? Had no idea, but but I'm enjoying it. We're enjoying it. Who was there for the Immaculate Reception? You guys weren't even born. You know what I mean? But 50 years ago, 50 years is a long time, and to be still enjoying it, celebrating it, how special is that, guys?
It is.
It really is. And and knowing that, in a way, it kind of started here at Penn State.
Sure.
I tell people that what made it happen was Joe Paterno always yelling at me, go to the ball, right? And that one time I went to the ball.
Pick it up right there.
What is your favorite football memory?
You mean besides the Immaculate Reception and winning four
And the Super Bowls, the Hall of Fame.
Hall of Fame. You know what? They're all great memories, great moments. And, when I, look at each one of them, NFL Man of the Year, which now is called the Walter Payton. That's very important. So all these things mean a lot for different stages of my career. 9-time Pro Bowls, and I said all of it, you love. But I always tell them I'm a Penn State grad, baby.
It's hard to believe he is gone, so full of life in that appearance. Among those remembering Franco today is former Pittsburgh Steelers teammate Tony Dungy, a Big Ten legend himself at Minnesota, calling Franco, quote, one of the kindest, gentlest men I have ever known, a great person, a great teammate, but so much more than that, a tremendous role model for me. Pat Freiermuth, like Franco, a former Nittany Lion and Steeler in the NFL, tweeted out a beautiful remembrance. Franco actually announced the pick when Freiermuth was drafted by Pittsburgh, called him a Penn State and Steeler legend, adding, quote, may your legacy live on forever, RIP 32. Penn State remembering Harris with these words, we are saddened to hear of the sudden loss of one of our own. Franco Harris always embodied what it meant to be a Nittany Lion. Our thoughts and prayers are with his family and friends through this time. And then this from Coach James Franklin, sending his condolences to all who were impacted by Harris, adding, quote, "It was his toughness and team-first approach as a Nittany Lion that will long be remembered by Penn Staters. Franco was a true steward of the blue and white, and he will be sorely missed." Franco Harris, Penn State legend, passing away today at the age of 72. On behalf of everyone here at the Big Ten Network, our condolences to his loved ones. He will indeed be missed, and we'll be right back. It is time for our big stat. Northwestern is now 9-2 after dismantling UIC last night. Their second straight 38-point win. They beat DePaul by the same margin over the weekend. That start, as you can see, is tied for the second best under Chris Collins and the best since the 2016-2017 season, which culminated in the Cats' first ever NCAA tourney bid. I'm not saying, I'm just saying. Head coach Chris Collins joins us now. He is today's big interview. Chris, welcome. Last two games really impressive. So you've now won 4 in a row going back to the game against Michigan State. What do you think has really clicked with this team, starting with that win over the Spartans and carrying forward to these last couple?
Yeah, I think, the whole season, our defense has been our identity. We've really, from day one in the summer and preseason, we understood that if we were going to be competitive, we were going to have to play elite defense. And our guys really have bought into that. We had a really tough performance in the ACC Big Ten Challenge playing against Pittsburgh. They came in and just really throttled us on our home floor. And we were able to get to the practice floor and kind of reestablish what we wanted to do as a team. Then certainly going on the road and winning in a tough environment like the Breslin Center, I think gave our guys a lot of confidence. And I think what we're seeing now is the offense is starting to catch up a little bit to where our defense has been. And we've been able to really score the ball well the last two games, 85 and 92 points. And, if we can continue to share the ball and make some open shots and play defense, hopefully that'll make us a really competitive team in the conference.
I want to dive a little bit more into the defense. I mean, some of the numbers are incredible. You guys are literally leading the nation in 2-point field goal percentage defense. And it's crazy. There are more than 360 teams. So to lead the nation in anything is really quite remarkable. You've generally been a good defensive team. I mean, I would say if you kind of look back through the years, probably defense slightly better than offense statistically. But this is a different level. How do you account for it? I mean, you say the guys have bought in, but there's got to be more to it than just saying, okay, we're going to be a good defensive team.
Well, first, I'm going to tape that clip and send it to my college coach because he told me I couldn't guard anybody when I played. So the fact that you're telling me that I've become a good defensive coach, that can maybe ingratiate me with Coach K. But, I think this year, more than ever, the player buy-in on that end of the floor has just been amazing. We talked about it as we got together as a group. I think last year we were very, very efficient offensively. We were more of an offensive team, and in a lot of respects, we weren't where we needed to be defensively. And in turn, I think it cost us in a lot of those close games. So, defense has been the focal point since day one of practice. We knew it's going to be something that we're going to have to hang our hat on. And I credit the players. We made a few adjustments maybe with some of the things we're doing on that end, but really it's more about the guys believing their connectivity. I've always said as a coach, you can tell when a team is connected by how they are on the defensive end of the floor because you need 5 guys connected as one. If one guy is not doing his job on that end of the floor, then you're going to get broken down. So I think the one thing the guys they're starting to get confident and, a little bit of, mojo with the defense, hearing them talk and things like that. And like I said, the work in progress has been the offensive end of the floor. And these last couple games being able to score it a little bit better and get up and attack in transition has been very, something that I've been really proud of.
It really has been, and Chase Audige, I think, is a guy who has stood out there. He's always been a fabulous defender, although he seems to have even upped that part of his game this year. But offensively, I mean, he was unbelievable against DePaul on Saturday. And it seems to me, and you and I have talked about this through the years, his shot selection has always been the greatest. It's been really good this year. It really feels like something's different in terms of his mentality on that end. What have you seen?
Well, I just think, like you called it, his maturity, his experience. He's not playing. I felt like at times he was really pressing early in his career. And it comes from a great place. It comes from a competitive spirit. Of wanting to do well, of wanting to win. And I thought he got himself sped up at times and got himself in bad spots. I think one of the things that's really helped him too is we're getting Boo Buie off the ball a little bit more and allowing Chase to have the ball in his hands and play a little bit as a main playmaker and pick and rolls and initiating our offense. And, I think it's just really settled him down. His decision making has been great. He's coupled that with, to me, I don't think he gets enough credit for how elite he is on the defensive end. I think he's one of the top defenders in the conference. And, we knew coming into this year, I talked about it with you in the summertime, like we have two senior guards who've been mainstays in this program. And in order for us to achieve the things we want to achieve, we need those guys to play at an all-conference caliber level. And, fortunately, over the last month or so, they've really turned it on and played great.
Chris, you and I attended the same high school. I was there a little bit before you at Glenbrook North High School of Ferris Bueller's Day Off fame. I want to ask you to reminisce a little bit about your high school days. What was your go-to Little Louie's order?
I was never a big hot dog guy, so I was more of a burger.
Okay.
More of a burger guy. I mean, Louis, great hot dog, but I was just never a big dog guy. I did have a big bone to pick with the ownership over there. They actually named a sandwich after Shire, and I didn't get one myself, so I was boycotting them for a while, but that we are now back in good graces, and definitely that was a go-to spot back in the day.
Can one still order the Shire? I haven't been there in quite a while, I have to say.
I'm sure they can. As we get older, people forget. Even my own son. Last year when Nick Hardy made it to the PGA Tour, my own son told me I've been removed from the Glenbrook North Mount Rushmore now of athletes. But maybe I have to break out some of those old tapes to let people know that I was all right back then too.
You were indeed Mr. Basketball. I need to ask you, can you still recite the first verse of Down to the River?
I cannot, but
really?
It's yeah.
Can you do the first sentence? The first line?
You're putting me on the spot here, Dave. I wish I had a little bit more. Why don't you give me a little bit of it?
Went down to the river, and then your response
yeah, man.
Started to drown.
Yeah, man.
Got to think about the Spartans.
Yeah, man.
Just couldn't go down.
See, I had it. I just needed
you do the man, Chris. The yeah, man was the easy part. Now you mentioned you were Mr. Basketball. You also have an unofficial IHSA record. That is, you attended the most bar mitzvahs of any player in IHSA history. I know Coach K loved that number. What was the exact number of bar mitzvahs?
Yeah, I actually moved to Northbrook, Illinois when I was in 7th grade when my dad got the Bulls job. And my social life, that year in the bar mitzvah run was amazing. I actually went to 96 bar mitzvahs over the course of a year span. The parties were amazing. I learned a lot about the Jewish faith and the services and a lot of my dear friends to this day. So happy Hanukkah to all. And I do remember my senior year, you guys will like this, my first game of the year, I was so excited. I scored 50 points against Deerfield High School. I called Coach K. I was all excited. I said, Coach, I had my first game of the year this year. I scored 50. And he goes, that's great, but my family and I were just talking about how you went to 96 bar mitzvahs. That's even better. That's amazing. And I said, yeah, it's pretty incredible, Coach. It's pretty awesome. So my Northbrook roots are going to run deep. I loved growing up there, and obviously that's a big part of my upbringing.
You mentioned Coach K. What's the biggest thing that you learned from him as a coach?
I think adaptability, flexibility. I don't think anyone throughout the tenure, understood as the game had changed, how to continue to keep your morals and values, what they are. Your standards don't change, but you have to be open to how the game is being played, how recruiting is being done, how the college game had changed throughout the years. And I admired him over that 40-plus year span, the way that he could keep reinventing himself as a coach and continue to succeed at the highest of levels. The other thing that really just stood out to me was the fire he had. I mean, there were days, man, and maybe the dog days of seasons in late January, early February, and he's in his 60s, and I'm thinking to myself, man, this is a guy who's won 5 national championships, Olympic gold medals, over 1,000 games, and he has a fire to play this game against Clemson or UVA or Florida State at the end of January like he's never won a game before, and that was always something that really resonated with me, is to continue to keep that competitive spirit and that fire no matter what, good or bad, and obviously a big part of who I am is been with my time with Coach, and I'm forever grateful for that.
He obviously wasn't the first person to coach you. That was your dad, Doug Collins, of course, former first-round pick in the NBA, a great player, a great commentator as well. How did you kind of combine what you learned from your dad with what you learned from Coach K?
Yeah, I mean, growing up, I was the kid who always wanted to tag along. I mean, it was an instant love affair with basketball. That was my time with my dad. He was playing as a professional athlete. I wanted to be in the locker room. I wanted to be at the practices. I wanted to tag along. I loved the game. I had a ball in my hands ever since I can remember. And I was just always the kid that kind of always just looked and listened and learned and observed, and I think back to my childhood. I mean, I'm a little kid and he's playing with guys like Dr. J and, that Sixer crew back in the 70s. And then in my formative years, having a chance to go to those practices with the Bulls with Michael and Scotty and Horace Grant and John Paxson and that whole crew, and just listening and learning and then going home at night and watching basketball with my dad. I always say the way I learned basketball the most was watching games at home with my dad. Me on one couch, him on the other, and you got maybe the best analyst of all time explaining basketball to you as you're watching the game. So much of me in basketball is from my dad. His competitive spirit, his work ethic, his passion, are all things that really resonated with me. And man, how lucky am I? I had my dad growing up, and then spent almost 20 years with Coach K. To have two of the best minds of the game to learn from has been really special in my life.
And I know the tradition with basketball in your family's continued. Your son Ryan is one of your managers now at Northwestern, a sophomore undergrad. What has it been like to share this experience with him and to kind of pass down the love of the game?
Yeah, it's awesome because for me, I was the son growing up, and I so valued. I was a Bulls ball boy, and I remember going to games with my dad and sitting under the basket and us kind of walking off the floor after big wins, and to have that time with your son, after a big win or just a tough practice or seeing him every day and being able to share that time. As we all know as fathers, it goes fast, and so for him to want to be here and to be a part of what we're doing and to get to see him every day and be a part of the team, that's been really special.
Well, I know it would be particularly special to return to the NCAA tournament with him. It's been 6 years since you made it. This is certainly a team off to a really good start. What would it take for this team to be the second Northwestern team to make the tourney?
Well, I think the one thing we've done is we've put ourselves in position with a good non-conference. We have one more opportunity here on the 29th against Brown to wrap up the non-conference slate. We got a good road win at Michigan State, and we always say the Big Ten, it's a 20-round fight. That's how I view it to the guys, and I always tell them if you can handle your business and take care of the non-league and put yourself in position, if you can win more rounds than you lose in the 20-round fight, then you're probably going to be in pretty good shape. So, I think for us, we got to stay healthy. We have to keep improving. I think teams are going to keep getting better as they do year in and year out. The level of coaching and the level of programs in this conference are incredible. So we got to keep getting better. Our players have to keep getting better. And obviously, we're going to have to win close games. You guys know, the Big Ten is going to be a gauntlet for everybody. There's going to be tons of close games night in and night out. And we're going to have to do a good job when we get in those close ones of winning our fair share share, and hopefully playing games in late February and early March that really matter. I know I would love nothing more for these guys. It's been a group that's really fun to coach. They work hard. They're a great group, and I would love to help them achieve their ultimate goal of playing in March this year.
All right, Chris, my goal is to have you back on in March talking about an NCAA tournament, and we'll go through the Glenbrook North alma mater together. How does that sound?
I'm gonna work on my down to the river. I feel bad. I feel inept. My bad on that one. Yeah. But proud Glenbrook North Spartan. All right. I know we both are.
Go Spartans. Thanks a lot, Chris. Congratulations. Have a great holiday season. Congrats on a great start. Later today, Mike Hall, Jerry DiNardo, Howard Griffith, and recruiting expert Alan True bring you 3 hours of analysis covering the entire conference on the Big Ten Live Signing Day special. Today, 2 Eastern on the Big Ten Network and the Fox Sports app. And Signing Day is our big story. Here's how the Big Ten classes are shaping up. This is up to the minute on 24/7 Sports. You see Ohio State, Penn State, and Michigan 1, 2, and 3. Michigan State is 4, so the top 4 classes all from the East. Nebraska's made a really big move. They are up to number 5, and then the top half of the league rounded out by Iowa and Northwestern. 3 hours of TV today, not quite enough for Alan True, so he's kind enough to spend a little time with us, just kind of give us the treetops, give us a little sneak peek of what we can expect when you guys get together for your massive coverage coming up later. Big picture, how's the Big Ten doing? How would you assess the class?
Well, I think that it's a typical Big Ten kind of class. You see Ohio State at the top, Penn State at the top. I think some of the schools who have done well recently in creeping up on those programs like the Nebraskas and the Iowas, but you also see Northwestern and schools like that doing well. So I think as a whole, there's a lot of talent coming into the conference, and you also see that Big Ten West loading up to see if they can take down the East.
Ohio State has been in the top 5 nationally each of the last 3 seasons. They are number 7 right now, although when you get really into the weeds, you look at the average ranking per recruit, they are number 3 in the country. So is this just a function of not having the numbers that some others have, or is there a concern if you're a Buckeye fan that you're not in the top 5?
I don't think there's any concern there. We say every year on this show that the rich get richer. It really is true at Ohio State, and it's true of the positions that they seem to do really well at. You have 4 wide receivers that are either 4 or 5-star guys coming into this class. There was some concern about the quarterback position. They found a guy late in the class in 4-star Lincoln Kienholz. So I think some of those concerns and some of the need areas have been solidified.
Give me some insight into Penn State's group. They had such a good class last year, a class that made a significant impact right away. They're right up there again, right behind Ohio State. What's the story with Penn State?
So I think there's some positions here in this class that you would expect them to do well at. They're known as linebacker U. There's good linebackers. There's good tight ends coming in. The difference makers, I think, here are on the offensive line. And what better year to have that in than the year after you signed Drew Aller, Nick Singleton. Now they put 2 really strong offensive linemen in front of them, Alex Birchmeyer and Javen Williams. 2 of the best offensive line recruits that James Franklin has signed, and I think it's a perfect complement to last year's class.
Well, last year's class was incredible. Obviously, Nick Singleton, Katron Allen, you mentioned Drew Aller, Abdul Carter made a huge impact. So that was a really good class last year. Michigan got off kind of a slow start. It feels like they have picked up some momentum here down the stretch. Bring us up to date on the Wolverines class.
Yeah, I still think it's a good class. I know some were expecting this class to be a top 5 type class, but Michigan, I think, has done a good job overall of always finding some guys who are under the radar and sprinkling in just the right amount of J.J. McCarthy's and Donovan Edwards, who are superstar kind of guys, and then also finding the under the radar guys. They've had some good players under Jim Harbaugh who were not national top-ranked guys. I think this class is more of the same, and they've been able to close strong here at the end and also get into the portal as well.
Yeah, that's the area where it's really interesting, and I want to ask you about that. They have the number 1 transfer class right now in the country. I mean, they've done an incredible job in the portal. I guess kind of a 2-part question. I'll ask you the first part first, and then I'll give you a follow-up on this. Bring us up to date on kind of what they've done in the portal, who they've gotten, and why that class is so highly thought of.
Yeah, so I think if you look in the portal, they were looking for a tight end late in this class. So instead of taking a high school guy who may have bumped up their high school recruiting ranking, now you take A.J. Barner, who is a talented guy, has experience in the Big Ten, I think can come in and make an immediate impact as opposed to a high school player who they may have had to wait on. So I think additions like that show that they're not concerned about the class rank, they're concerned about getting the best players on the field, and they get immediate guys like A.J. Barner.
How has your world changed with the portal? I mean, it does feel like there used to be a feeling that if you looked at your recruiting ranking and it wasn't where you wanted it to be, there was nothing you could do about it until a year from now. And it feels like the formula has changed somewhat here. So how has your world changed, and how has the way that you evaluate success or lack of success in this endeavor, school by school, changed?
It's changed a lot because now we have to consider what we were just talking about, which is that some schools will allocate their scholarships differently. So that will affect their high school ranking. It's affected the number of high school players that a college will sign. But it also allows a school to jump in and fill immediate needs. Before, if you had an immediate need, it was hard to count on a high school guy to do that. You maybe could go into the junior college ranks. Now you can go into the portal if you have somebody unexpectedly leave for the draft or you have a hole to fill. I think it's much easier for schools to do that, even if their high school class ranking takes a hit as a result.
Is there a way to kind of, when you recruit high school players, you're talking about four-year players, at least in theory, although guys transfer so much now, maybe you're not, versus some of these where you're plugging a hole out of the portal. I mean, it's a grad transfer, it might be a year. Is there a way to kind of have some sort of overarching formula which fits all of that together? Are you guys endeavoring to do that?
We actually do have a toggle now on 24/7 Sports. If you look at the top, you can look at class rank by just high school players, just transfers, or the two melded together. You just have to know where that drop-down menu is. So we're getting there.
So there is a way. I mean, and it really varies by school, right? So are there some Big Ten schools that are kind of, obviously Michigan State is the most famous example of the way Mel Tucker flipped it. Are Big Ten schools some more into the portal than others are?
Absolutely, and some still take a lot of high school kids. You see at the top of the class, there's still a lot of classes that are 20-plus high school players. So I still think that for the most part, that's your foundation. You don't want to bring in a bunch of 1 or 2 year guys. And so that still exists. You see Northwestern not going into the portal as much more high school players, but you do see some other schools too. So I think there's just more than one way to do this right now.
Is there a class you think is underrated in the Big Ten?
You know what? I think Purdue's is. And they've had some change there, but they were able to keep that class together. The previous staff did a good job of building that class, and Ryan Walters has kept them there. They have several guys who were coveted by other Big Ten schools or SEC schools, and we think there's a couple of future pros in that class. So even though they're a little bit further down the ranking, there's some really good individual talent in that class.
Of these three schools that changed coaches here, all of them in the Big Ten West, you say Ryan Walters did a good job of holding the class together. What about the other two? How did Luke Fickell and Matt Rule do? It seems like Nebraska's doing really well, huh?
They've had a good couple weeks, and they had a really good day today getting Malachi Coleman back in the class. He's the #1 player in the state of Nebraska, top 75 guy in the country. And then Wisconsin, they had guys leave the class before Luke Fickell got there, so he had to replace some holes. I think the nice thing for him is that he had a good class at Cincinnati, able to bring a few of those commits with him to Madison now.
Is there one player outside of the obvious? I mean, there are five-star guys who everyone's going to be talking about, and that's just kind of the nature of this deal. But is there someone who you have your eye on, who you feel like is a particularly good fit, or a name that we're going to hear about that might not be at the very top of the recruiting rankings?
Yeah, outside of the obvious junior college guys and the top guys, I think Darius Taylor at Minnesota, when you look at his talent level, he had an outstanding senior season. Michigan came after him. There were some other schools that tried to get in on him late. He stuck with Minnesota. That's a big signing for him. And, with Mo Ibrahim moving on, there's going to be some availability there at running back, and I think he's going to come in physically ready to compete.
I know it's a busy day for you. You need to mentally prepare yourself for 3 hours with that cast of characters. So really appreciate you coming and spending a few minutes with us.
Absolutely.
Shedding a little light on the recruiting world. Basketball last night in the Big Ten. 3 teams played, 3 teams won. Indiana bouncing back from consecutive losses to Arizona and Kansas. Easy win over Elon. Trace Jackson-Davis did not play. Nebraska by 10 over Queens University. They shot 53%, had 5 players in double figures. And then we mentioned Northwestern, the easy win earlier. Trey Demps is here to break all of this down. Let's start with Indiana. Trace Jackson-Davis was out with a back injury. Mike Woodson said afterwards he did not know how long it would be until he comes back. Xavier Johnson is out with the foot injury that he suffered over the weekend, and he is in a boot. Does not look like he'll be back anytime soon. Jordan Geronimo was out as well. So injuries are a big story for IU, but let's put that aside for a moment. What did you think of the game against Elon? Obviously not the level of competition of what they played here the last couple of weeks, but a comfortable win.
Yeah, it was a comfortable win. And I thought they did a great job on offense. Elon played a little bit of a matchup zone, And I thought Indiana did a really good job of pushing the ball and beating the zone down the floor, getting some easy post-ups. Race Thompson really established himself in the paint, got to some jump hooks. And I like the guard play as well. I mean, Jalen Hood-Schifino, now with an extended role, having the ball in his hands, he had 5 turnovers. But I like the fact that he was aggressive, assertive, confident in his shot. But I think he has to really work on making the simple play. I think there's certain times where he tries to make too cute of passes, tries to make the fancy play. I think he has to make the simple play, especially now that he has the ball in his hands more.
Is that a function of you're young, you're a highly touted guard, you have incredible skill, which he clearly does? Is it just about a mentality shift, you think?
I think so, because when you have that much talent and that much skill and you're able to break your man off the dribble and you have an array of moves, I think sometimes you have to simplify your game a little bit and make the easy play. A lot of times just a straight line drive into a floater. Sometimes he gets into the paint, he tries to make one too many moves, tries to make a no-look pass. I think it's just a matter of simplifying his game, making the easy play, finding guys, and I think it's going to come, especially with Xavier Johnson out.
Another young player, C.J. Gunn, played well for them, really the best that we have seen him play in an IU uniform. So some encouraging things. They're going to need to get healthy, clearly, and that is a concern. Again, it doesn't sound like the Trace Jackson Davis thing is a long-term injury, but Mike Woodson not shedding a ton of light on it. We had Chris Collins on earlier. Northwestern really looked good on both ends of the court against UIC.
Yeah, this offense is really starting to come together. They run kind of a 5-out offense. They run some Princeton concepts where they kind of get some back cuts and get good movement off the ball. And I thought Coach Collins has done a good job of all year of kind of playing to his strengths on the offensive end, because they don't have a ton of guys that you can put the ball in their hands and that can make plays. And so I think now it's just a matter of that this team is starting to get confidence on the offensive end, because you know what they're going to bring on the defensive end. And what I really love on the defensive end is they're able to funnel teams into the dead spots of the court, where you kind of get them into that mid-range area. They do a good job of playing without fouling and forcing tough shots. They've been able to take away opposing teams' best players out of the game. Jace Carter was, had a real hot streak going into last night for UIC. He had, I think, 3 of 11 shooting, 8 points, 4 turnovers. He had been averaging 20 points over the last 3 games. So they're able to take opposing teams' best players out of the game.
Have done an incredible job on the defensive end, as we outlined with Chris. We have talked about they need to be better offensively, and they are a little bit better these last 4 games, and Chris was talking about it. Last 4 games, they're 10th in the Big Ten in offensive efficiency, which isn't great, but if you have a really good defense, that's still pretty good, and that includes 1 really poor performance against Prairie View. So 3 of those 4 games, they certainly played well offensively, and Brooks Barnheiser was a revelation last night.
And Roper as well. I mean, those 2 guys combined for 30 points. If they can get contributions from those 2 guys off the bench, because those guys are talented players, I think that takes this team to the next level, because you know what you're going to get from Boo Boo. You know what you're going to get from Chase Audige. Those guys are seniors, veterans, are going to make big plays. But I think if you get that bench production from your guards, it takes this team to the next level.
What about Nebraska? Queens is a team out of Charlotte that's transitioning to Division I, but we were talking yesterday, they played reasonably well here early on this year. This did not figure to be an easy game. This was a team that had beaten Marshall, for instance, which is a top 100 Ken Pom team. What did you take from Nebraska, a 10-point win?
They got back to their strengths. I think sometimes, I think after the game, Fred Hoiberg talked about the fact is getting the ball in the right players' hands. And the ball should be in Derek Walker and Sam Griesel's hands pretty much on every possession. And then the rest of the guys can play off of them. Tominaga can play off of them. Gary can play off of them. Gary's a great cutter. Tominaga is a great shooter. But I thought they did a really good job of establishing their 2 main guys. And something that was interesting, in their 2 losses in the previous 2 games, they only had 4 post-ups for Sam Griesel. Last night, he had 7 post-ups. I think that's the bread and butter of his game, where he plays out of the post and makes plays. He finds Derek Walker. He finds shooters. And I really like Derek Walker. He had 6 assists last night, was able to find guys. Queens was doubling. He was doing a good job of reading the double team and making the right play.
Griesel's a tough matchup just because of his size as a point guard.
Yep.
He, as you say, can take guys down onto the post, has great vision, really good passer, and Walker's been he's been their best guy, really has had a nice year. So that's the story from last night. On the men's side, there's a big one on the women's side as well. Michigan knocked off North Carolina in the Jumpman Invitational in Charlotte. It was the Wolverines' 9th ever win against an AP Top 10 team. 4 of them have come in the last 2 years. Leah Brown led the way with 25. For the Wolverines, they held Carolina at a 32% shooting. Same 2 teams on the men's side tonight. It highlights a slate that includes 5 games in all. The Iowa game moved up to an early tip, by the way, due to an impending snowstorm. You can get that game over on Big Ten Plus. We've got 2 games here on the Big Ten Network, Michigan State and Oakland, Ohio State and Maine. But let's start with that Michigan-Carolina game. Wolverines, no marquee wins at this point. They've beaten one team that has a Ken Pom top 40 ranking. So if you're going to get a significant win in the non-conference trade, this is it.
And the key for this game is establishing your perimeter defense. I think that's something they've really struggled with, is guarding opposing players' guards. And if you could really slow down Davis and Love, who are very talented players, I think that can build confidence going into conference play. And Carolina's losses, those 2 guys have shot a combined 37% from the field. So if you can make those guys take tough shots, be high volume, pressure them, make them uncomfortable, I think they should have success. And I think an interesting matchup is going to be who's going to guard Pete Nance. Because when you look at Michigan, you know, a lot of their 4 men, Terrence Williams, Joey Baker, those guys are a little bit undersized. At the 4, Pete Nance is a great offensive player, so I'm looking at that matchup as well.
Heels have won 3 straight after a 4-game losing streak. You mentioned Nance. He had the huge shot against Ohio State, which sent the game into overtime, a game North Carolina ultimately won. You worry a little bit, or I do anyway, about Michigan's bench. I mean, they were outscored 38-9 in their last outing against Lipscomb, a game which they came pretty close to losing. Especially without Jalen Llewellyn, how much is depth a concern here now for Juwan Howard's team?
But I really like, you know, without Jalen Llewellyn, one of the things they did a great job of taking care of the basketball with him on the court. I mean, he came from Princeton as a guy that's a high cerebral player. Even though he wasn't scoring the basketball a ton, he was running good. He was running the show, you know, making the right reads. But I really like what Doug McDaniel brings to this offense. I mean, he's kind of a different player, you know, a guy that's going to really get out in transition, push the pace. And he's just a confident kid. I mean, you could just tell by his demeanor that he was ready for the moment to kind of be inserted into the starting role and kind of run the show. And I really like this Michigan team playing with more pace. I thought last year that was when they started to have more success on the offensive end, running less plays, getting out in transition, kind of getting to those quick hitters on the offensive end. Doug McDaniels, I think, really fits maybe even a little bit better than Llewellyn, you know, going into the Big Ten play, because I think they're going to be able to get some easy baskets in transition.
One more game I want to get to right now. Number 1, Purdue gets New Orleans, one of the worst teams in the country by a lot of the conventional measures. So I don't think we would expect Purdue to be in a jeopardy of losing this game. That being said, you never know. But what are you watching here from the Boilermakers against what figures to be a little bit of an outmanned opponent?
If I'm Matt Painter in this game, I'm saying I'm putting a limit on how much we could throw the ball into Zach Edey, because I want my perimeter players being confident going into conference play. You know, last game they shot 5 of 34 from the field. You're not going to be able to get it done by just throwing the ball into Zach Edey every possession. I mean, he's only human, right? I mean, he can't get the ball and score on every single possession. So I want to see if I can run some actions for my guards. You know, Matt Painter has an extensive playbook where he runs a lot of misdirection stuff. I want to get them in actions and situations where they have the ball in their hands, coming off of ball screens, coming down off of pin downs, handoffs, different situations where they're confident in attacking, making shots off the dribble, creating. I think that's the biggest thing, I think, in a game like this against New Orleans.
It does feel like they have more than capable shooters, doesn't it? I mean, these last 2 games, they haven't shot the 3 particularly well. It's clear teams are just collapsing on Edey and making him make some decisions with the ball, and he's kicked it out and gotten the ball to open shooters. They just haven't knocked down the shots. But I guess from where I sit, I don't see it as they don't have good enough shooters.
Right.
I see it as their good shooters aren't shooting particularly well. Would you agree with that assessment?
Yeah, and I think it's a confidence thing. And I think as an offensive player, you recognize the fact that teams are really starting to sell out on Edey, and they're purposefully leaving you open. I think that can kind of be a mind game at times as an offensive player, because what teams are doing is they're sending the double team before Zach Edey even catches the ball. They're sending kind of a roamer to kind of sit there in the paint and be there already in position for the double team, which is pretty much leaving the perimeter players wide open on the weak side. So that's what I want to see. You know, you skip the ball over, you know, to a perimeter player, a guy being aggressive and assertive of either attacking the closeout or knocking down that catch and shoot jump shot.
Amazingly, this will be the first ever home game for Purdue as the number 1 team in the country.
Wow. Wow, I mean that's huge. I mean for Mackey and the fan base, I expect that place to be rocking. I hope they continue to win. It's just great to have this conference to have a number one team in the country.
Atmosphere-wise, where did that rank among the best places you played?
Oh man, it was so tough to play there. I mean, the fans are like right on top of you. They're rowdy, but I think one of the best things about Purdue fans is like they have a knowledge, and they're pretty just knowledgeable about basketball as a whole. I think certain fan bases, I look across, the Big Ten.
Don't name any names.
They don't even name any names, but they kind of have a bias,
Yeah.
and if you're critical about their team, they get mad at you. They'll come at you at social media. But I really like the Purdue fan bases because they really know the game. They're unbiased. They know the truth about their team and where they stand from year to year, and it's just exciting. And it's always great to have Purdue be atop of the Big Ten.
A few minutes left here with Trey. Let's get into those games tonight on the Big Ten Network, starting with Michigan State. First game in 11 days. Still no Malik Hall, although he is back at practice apparently. So there's a sense perhaps he'll be back in the lineup here soon for Michigan State. But what are you watching as they take on what is a struggling Oakland team?
Yeah, and they struggle on the defensive end. They give up 81 points per game. They give up 10 threes per game. So I'd expect Michigan State to have a ton of success on the offensive end. One thing that I really like that Michigan State has done is how they've been utilizing Joey Hauser. I mean, they utilize him a little bit as a guard in certain situations with him coming off of pin downs, sometimes as a four, kind of in roll and replace situations where he's coming from under the basket and then sprinting to the top of the key. He's playing off the catch and doing a great job playing off the dribble. And the fact that he's really developed a post-up game as well has been key, I think, for this team, especially with Malik Hall out.
And they got figured out on the offensive end. I mean, 4 straight games with fewer than 70 points. It just feels like they haven't totally clicked there. And defense has been an issue, frankly, at times, too.
Yeah, over the last 2 games, though, they've given up only 33% from the field. I think when you understand that you're missing a guy like Malik Hall, you've had some injuries, you've had a little bit of struggles on the offensive end, you have to get back to your roots and your identity. And I thought over the last 2 games, they've done a good job of being physical, extending their defense, because that's what Tom Izzo basketball, Michigan State basketball has been about for the last 20 years. And I think if you get away from that identity, you can kind of have some struggles because you're just getting away from who you are.
Let's get into Ohio State a little bit, trying to bounce back from that loss to North Carolina we were alluding to earlier, taking on Maine. Again, doesn't figure to be overly competitive on paper, but you never know. That being said, what interests you here about the Buckeyes?
Well, Maine has a ton of international players, and they move the ball well. They cut high cerebral players, and so Ohio State's going to really have to lock in on the defensive end. The thing that's interesting about this Ohio State team is they isolate more than most teams in the Big Ten. They're going to isolate Justice Suing. They're going to isolate Bryce Sensabaugh, Zed Key. They kind of simplified their offense just because they have young guards. And so I wonder sometimes if they can get more ball movement, get Sean McNeil a little bit more involved. But, I mean, they do have good isolation players. I mean, Justice Suings is a guy that you can give the ball to in the post, in the high post situations. Zed Key is being a lot more effective in the low post as well. You're able to give it to him. And Bryce Sensabaugh, I mean, I just love this kid's game. I mean, he's a tremendous freshman, a guy that's a really strong left-hand driver, a guy that's a clutch player, not afraid of the moment. Kind of reminds me of Malachi Branham in the sense of, like, he doesn't care if it's against Carolina. It doesn't care if it's against a mid-major. He's going to give you that same performance. He's going to be confident on the offensive end.
It's interesting because, of course, it got overshadowed by the fact that they lost in overtime. But how about Bryce Sensabaugh taking what would have been the game-winning shot in Madison Square Garden? I mean, that was a big moment, and he rose to the occasion. And this whole freshman class has. I mean, about 42% of their scoring from freshmen. That's among the top 3 in the power conferences. So it speaks to, look, they've got some good veteran pieces. You mentioned Key and Suing, but this is a team that's relying on young players and those young players coming through. Finally, Iowa and Eastern Illinois. I mentioned the game got moved up because of weather that is coming into the Midwest. Sounds like still no Chris Murray likely, but perhaps will come back for their next game, their next Big Ten game against Nebraska. But, man, in his absence, Philip Labracha in particular has just been incredible.
Yeah, he's starting to get more confident within the flow of the motion offense that Fran McCaffrey runs, finding his spots. He's scoring in different ways. He's scoring in the post. He's scoring in the perimeter off the catch. Just love his game. I think the biggest key, though, for this team is Peyton Stanford. I really think that he's the X factor because now that gives you a 4th scorer to go along with Patrick McCaffrey, Chris Murray when he gets back in, Labracha, Tony Perkins as well. But I think Peyton Stanford, if he can really get going And, because he's a guy that's kind of like a microwave. If he sees one go in, he can knock down 4 or 5 in a row. And he's kind of one of the only players on this team that can do that. And I think also along with that is the defensive effort. I think if they can bring defensive effort on a consistent basis, I think they should be atop of the Big Ten.
One thing that I think has been maybe a little bit of a silver lining, and assuming that Chris Murray comes back and is healthy, is again, you've seen players step up and play significant roles. I would say Sanford, Rebracha, Patrick McCaffrey you'd expect, but how about Connor McCaffrey's had some really big moments?
Yeah, I mean, he's kind of like the leader and just kind of the veteran of this team, just his overall presence. And he's starting to knock down shots at a high clip. I think he's at the 50, 40, 90 club as well. I mean, he's playing terrific basketball.
Cool story. Guys had a lot of injury issues. Fun to see him finishing on a positive note. That is the note we will finish on this Wednesday. See you next time on Big Ten Today.